All right, today we got an interesting little deep dive into the Rothschild family. Much love, welcome, thank you for being here. Let's get into it. We're going to start at the beginning. Not quite the beginning because they did exist prior to this man, but their dynasty into global dominance really started here with Mayer Amschel Rothschild, 1744 to 1812, in Frankfurt, Germany's Jewish ghetto, the Judengasse. Born to a money changer trader family, developed expertise in rare coins, which attracted wealthy clients. Most notably, cultivated a relationship with Prince Wilhelm IX of Hesse-Kassel, one of Europe's wealthiest rulers. This relationship became the foundation of the family's financial rise. Building the banking network. Mayer had 5 sons, whom he strategically placed across major European financial centers. Amschel, Frankfurt, Solomon, Vienna, Nathan in London, Kalman or Carl in Naples, Jacob or James in Paris. This was genuinely innovative, a coordinated family banking network across competing nations. What made them influential? Speed of communication between branches gave them information advantages. Government bond financing, they helped finance wars and national debts, financing the Napoleonic Wars on multiple sides. This is fascinating, and much controversy revolves around this beginning period, especially the Napoleonic Wars, because they were faster than the government's couriers, and the nation's couriers. So what they did was essentially, or the legend says, they spread essentially false information to the UK or Britain. It was Britain at the time, not the UK. And they were able to purchase and buy up a bunch of government bonds, land, assets, through saying that Napoleon was coming, and they were screwed, and then so, insider trading, that's the beginning. Maybe not the beginning, but pretty influential. Let's move on. Rothschild and Prince Wilhelm IX of Hesse-Kassel. Prince Wilhelm IX, later Elector Wilhelm I, was considered one of the wealthiest rulers in Europe at the time. His wealth came from a somewhat controversial source, the Hessian soldier trade. Wilhelm's father, Landgrave Frederick II, had pioneered the practice of leasing Hessian soldiers to foreign powers, essentially a mercenary army at that rate. Most famously, approximately 17,000 Hessian soldiers were leased to the British Crown during the American Revolutionary War. This generated enormous wealth for the Hesse-Kassel treasury. Wilhelm inherited and continued this practice, accumulating vast sums. How Mayer Rothschild cultivated the relationship. The coin collection angle. Mayer initially approached Wilhelm through his expertise in rare coins and antiquities. Wilhelm was a collector. Mayer offered coins at below market value deliberately. This was a calculated long-term investment in the relationship. Gradual trust building. Mayer worked his way from coin dealer to financial agent. He demonstrated reliability and discretion, key qualities Wilhelm valued given the sensitive nature of his finances. The financial relationship develops. What Mayer did for Wilhelm: managed investments, collected debts owed to Wilhelm, handled currency exchange, provided loans when needed. What made this valuable to Mayer? Access to enormous capital, a prestigious client that attracted other wealthy clients, credibility in financial circles. The Napoleon crisis, the pivotal moment. This is where the relationship became historically significant. The situation. Napoleon invaded and occupied Hesse-Kassel in 1806. Wilhelm was forced to flee into exile. Napoleon specifically sought to seize Wilhelm's fortune. This was a massive amount of money. Estimates suggest around 3 million gulden, extraordinarily large for the time. What happened? Wilhelm entrusted his fortune to Mayor Rothschild for safekeeping. This was an enormous act of trust given the circumstances. The details of exactly what happened next are somewhat historically debated. The contested history. The traditional narrative, Mayer hid the money from Napoleon, used it carefully, and returned it to Wilhelm after Napoleon's defeat. The Rothschilds acted with complete loyalty and integrity. Maybe. I don't believe that. The more critical view. Evidence suggests Mayer and his sons, Nathan, actually used Wilhelm's capital to fund their own financial operations, particularly in Nathan's London operations. The money was used to finance trade and government bonds. Wilhelm did eventually get his money back with interest, but the Rothschilds effectively had use of enormous capital during a critical period of their expansion. All right, and I'm going to go into this as well. As far as investments go, you can use money. You need money to make money. I think that's well known at this point. So with that enormous sum of money, most likely what they had done was invest into other nations because they had banks in other nations, and Europe at that time, specifically these other nations, needed capital movement. Because these European nations were feuding for forever, since the dawn of time. And so what was done, and you'll see this later in this video, because I'll go over World War I. This family in particular, the Rothschilds, fund both sides of conflicts, and then those nations that they fund become indebted to them, and debts are paid, especially in with these people. All right, what historians generally agree on given the situation: the relationship was mutually beneficial. Yeah, it provided crucial capital during the Rothschilds' most important growth phase. Whether this constitutes betrayal of trust or shrewd financial management depends on perspective. Legacy of this relationship. For the Rothschilds, provided seed capital for major expansion, established their reputation for handling sensitive high-stakes finances, connected them to royal and aristocratic networks across Europe. Nathan's London house in particular benefited enormously. For Wilhelm, his fortune was preserved during a dangerous period. He received returns on his money. He maintained a trusted financial partner for years afterward. What the key takeaway is: this relationship illustrates a pattern that would define the Rothschilds' rise, building relationships with the most powerful individuals of their time, providing genuine value while simultaneously leveraging those relationships for their own strategic advancement. Nathan Rothschild, London operations, and the Napoleonic Wars. Nathan Rothschild, the most talented son. Many historians consider Nathan the most financially gifted of Mayer's 5 sons. His move to England. Arrived in Manchester around 1798 to 1800. Initially in the textile trade, recognized London as the center of global finance, relocated to London and established N.M. Rothschild and Sons. Became a naturalized British subject. Granted, I would also like to note, N.M. Rothschild's Sons, still operable to date, kind of their headquarters, still in the same location. His character, described as aggressive, brilliant, and unconventional, less concerned with social niceties than financial results, reportedly had an extraordinary ability to assess risk, built a reputation for always honoring commitments. The London banking house. What Nathan built. Established operations in New Court, St. Swithin's Lane, in the city of London. This address remains the Rothschilds' headquarters to date. Became a primary dealer in British government bonds, gilts. Developed relationships with the British Treasury. The Information Network. Nathan developed what was arguably the best private intelligence network in Europe, employed couriers, agents, and informants across the continent, used carrier pigeons for rapid communication, ships on standby for cross-channel communication. This information advantage was enormously valuable in financial markets. Financing the Napoleonic Wars. The scale of the challenge. Britain needed to finance its own massive military operations, provide subsidies to allied nations fighting Napoleon, including Prussia, Austria, Portugal, and others, move enormous sums of money across war-torn Europe. Why this was extraordinarily difficult. Traditional banking networks were disrupted by war. Moving physical gold across Napoleon-controlled Europe was dangerous. Allied governments desperately needed reliable payment mechanisms. No existing institution could handle this scale reliably. The Rothschild solution. The Wellington subsidy operation. The British government needed to pay Wellington's armies in the Iberian Peninsula, which would be Spain and Portugal, also needed to subsidize Allied armies across Europe. Nathan became the primary contractor for this operation, working with his brothers across Europe to move money. How they did it. Nathan would purchase gold in London. Brothers would coordinate distribution through their European networks, use sophisticated bills of exchange to move value without moving physical gold, essentially created an early form of international wire transfer. The operation was described by the British government as indispensable. The profits. The Rothschilds earned substantial commissions on these transactions. Exact figures are debated but clearly transformative for the family wealth. More importantly, they demonstrated capability at a sovereign level. Key government relationships established. British government, John Charles Harries, Commissary-in-Chief, primary government contact, described Nathan as essential to war financing effort. This relationship opened doors to ongoing British government business. Allied governments. Operations touched Austrian, Prussian, and Portuguese treasuries. Each contact became a potential future banking relationship. Brothers in Vienna and Frankfurt managed these relationships. The Waterloo story. Set up June 1815. The situation. Napoleon had escaped from Elba. The 100 Days campaign was underway. The Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815 would determine Europe's future. Financial markets were extremely volatile. British government bonds, consols would collapse in value if Napoleon won, surge in value if Wellington won. The information advantage. Nathan's intelligence network in action. Nathan had agents positioned near the battlefield. A Rothschild agent named John Roworth was reportedly present at Waterloo. Information was carried to the coast. Crossed the channel ahead of official government dispatches. Nathan received news of Wellington's victories before the British government. The timeline. Battle ended evening of June 18th. Official government news arrived in London June 21st. Nathan reportedly received news on June 19th through the 20th. This gave him a significant window. What Nathan did, the disputed account. The popular legend, this is one of the most famous stories in financial history. The story goes, Nathan appeared at his usual position on the London Stock Exchange, began selling British consols, government bonds. Other traders watched Nathan. He was considered the best informed man in the market. They assumed he was selling because Napoleon had won. This triggered a market panic. Everyone began selling. Consols crashed in value. Nathan's agents were quietly buying everything they could. When official news of Wellington's victory arrived, consols surged. Nathan allegedly made a fortune in a single day. The more measured historical account. The story, as popularly told, is likely embellished. I don't believe that. first appeared in a French pamphlet with an anti-Rothschild sentiment decades later. Niall Ferguson and other serious historians have examined the actual records. Nathan did profit from Waterloo, but possibly through bond positions he already held, gold operations related to war financing, general market activity rather than one dramatic day. What records actually show? Nathan's own letters suggest he was primarily concerned with winding down the war financing operation. He did hold significant bond positions. Family did profit substantially from the post-Waterloo period. The dramatic single-day manipulation story is probably myth. The underlying truth of information advantage and profit is likely real. Why the story persists. Its significance, whether fully accurate or not, the Waterloo story captures something real. Information as financial weapon. The Rothschilds genuinely had better information than markets. 2. Scale of influence. They were significant enough to move markets. 3. The intersection of war and finance. They operated at this nexus. 4. Jewish banking conspiracy fears. This story was later weaponized for anti-Semitic narratives. The darker use of the story. The Waterloo narrative was picked up by anti-Semitic propagandists in the 19th and 20th centuries, used as supposed evidence of Jewish manipulation of governments and markets. The Nazi regime used it extensively in propaganda. A 1940 Nazi propaganda film called Die Rothschilds used a version of this story, important to distinguish historical financial power from conspiracy mythology. I don't really believe it to be a conspiracy entirely. I believe this was a very strategic moment to gain power. Just as the relationship with Wilhelm Hesse-Kassel. This was a major power. That's what I'll leave it at. One thing I would like to also state is they had a bank in France. So, they were able to play both sides. That's what I would like to really focus on in this video, is that they are able to play both sides of war. Through money. And, to date, they do this. To date. And I find that to be very important because loyalty is important to me. And, you could make the argument that they're loyal to themselves and they have a great big community. But I believe pretty sinister stuff goes on, and that this family is involved in. I'm not saying that the family is the key factor in it. I don't know. But they tend to be involved in scandals, massive power grabs, control of populations, of governments, of markets, all that sort of stuff. They are involved in it. Maybe not the primary factors. I kind of believe they are huge factors in it, but let's move on. Post-Waterloo position. What Nathan had built by 1815, dominant position in British government bond market, relationships with multiple European governments, proven capability to operate at sovereign scale, the most trusted and feared name in European finance. Foundation for the family to become the most powerful private banking dynasty of the 19th century. Key takeaways. Nathan Rothschild transformed a family banking operation into a sovereign-level financial institution by solving a problem no one else could solve, moving money reliably across a continent at war. The Waterloo story, whether literally true or embellished, reflects the genuine reality of the Rothschild information and financial advantage of the era.